Hello, everybody. Welcome to IST 110. I'm, of course, Professor S, and this is today's lecture. So, what we're going to talk about today is, I guess, the value of information. I mean, I know that that's what this says, but it's a bunch of different things that I put together based upon this chapter that I think could be useful. Anyways, first thing that we're going to talk about is metadata, and oftentimes we associate metadata with files and things like that, but I mean, really, the concept of metadata has been something that's been around for a long, long time. The idea is like you have data, and that's good, but then you need data about the data, and that's what metadata is. And that's been around, like I said, for a long time. So if you think back to, I mean, it's been around as long as we've had libraries, where as long as we've had collections of books, where it's not just important just to have the information. You need a way to organize it so you can access that information. You need to be able to, instead of just sifting through all that stuff every time, being able to find out like an author or a title or subject. Those are important things. And so that's oftentimes like how books could be arranged in order to find them. And so that's things that are usually information that's tied to like books. And there's other things that are tied to it too, like copyright information, publishing information, all that sort of things now. But the idea is like it's that information to help organize the data. All right, so when we're talking about computers and we're talking about files and metadata, the metadata is also important because it tells the computer what to do with a lot of that information. I mean, it could also be used for helping us finding that information. But okay, so let's talk about like what the different things are. So like one of the things is like the name of the file. That's something that's important to files because then that helps us kind of differentiate between file 1 and file 2. Then there's also different types of formats, and like this is super important to the computer because if you think about the data itself for a file, it's a bunch of ones and zeros. And so how do you know the difference between ones and zeros for an audio file and a image? And it's that metadata in the beginning that says this is a JPEG, this is a MP3, this is a whatever, right? So that's one of the things that's like important with the metadata. There's also information about the size, like how much space to look at, because if you think about this is on your hard drive, or your solid state drive, it's a bunch of ones and zeros. And so having the that metadata that's before the actual data indicates like what it's supposed to do with that data, how far it's supposed to look, that sort of thing, maybe when it was made, those sorts of things. And so depending, like there's not, the metadata for each file is not always the same. Some contain more, some contain less. Like in the book, the EXIF format is something that's applied commonly to images. And like for images, it can include different information about the camera that it's taken, like the different exposure settings, the different camera itself, the body, like all those different things, and even can sometimes indicate location. And so depending upon how these images are used, maybe you might want a scrub of some of that information. So you wouldn't be able to you don't want to get rid of all the metadata because you still want to be able to view that file, but maybe there's some metadata that you might want to remove, like if you're sharing it in public, where you were, where you took it. Maybe. Another thing that I want to talk about is like speaking of privacy information is the incognito mode. So incognito mode is something that a lot of browsers offer for people that want some privacy when they're browsing. And what it does is it removes history, browser cache, cookies, form data, those sorts of things. So it's not in there all the time. So a reason why you might want to use this is like, for instance, like say you're on a public computer and you want to, I don't know, it's probably a good idea for any public computer. Like if you're entering any sort of information, you might want to be on incognito mode so it doesn't stay on that computer. Whether that's going on Facebook or that's going on, I don't know, any sort of site where you enter information. So then that to help prevent that information from not lingering on your computer or that computer. However, something to keep in mind is that incognito mode might necessarily mean that all that data is gone once you're done. It should be, or mostly is at least, when you're done off of the computer. However, like there's add-ons that can happen with the browser that might hold on to some information that might be able to be accessed later. And then maybe the browser doesn't actually do a true removal, depending upon the browser and how it treats its incognito mode. Another thing, too, is you still have to worry about the people outside the browser sort of thing. So, I don't know, people watching over your shoulder while you're entering passwords into things, like people taking pictures of you and stuff like that. There's also thinking about the information that is coming from the sites. So, like, for instance, if you remember when we were talking about packets, when an individual is accessing information off of a website, they're sending information to the website, requesting information, and that website is sending it back to them. And both of those things contain packets of information. So packets are the files and the requests that are broken down into bite-sized chunks that are shot out into the internet to be received and interpreted. Now the thing is it's not, you don't have a dedicated line. Generally speaking, you don't have a dedicated line from you to that other computer. Generally speaking, like when you're going to a website, you don't usually have a dedicated line. VPNs might help get something sort of like a dedicated line, but for the most part, just general browsing. If you do just a normal search, what you're doing is kind of the equivalent of being in a room with somebody, right? And so say you're on one side of the room and they're on the other side of the room and you're talking to them. So you're sending information to them, they're sending information back to you. But the thing is with that sound is that anybody can pick that up, right? And so we have different things that we can do to help make that more secure. Like maybe encrypting the message so then sure other people can hear it, but they're not able to make sense of it. It's just a bunch of nonsense. Another thing too is maybe having essentially talking in rooms where people aren't normally there. So like taking paths that don't usually have that much traffic, like that sort of thing is ways to kind of think about it. And we kind of address this a lot when we're talking about VPNs. VPNs, they can direct you in routes that kind of private lines. They can encrypt your information like we just said. And they can send the information for you as a proxy. But the idea is it's like these packets, it's even when you're sending these packets and the message is encrypted, it kind of is known who you're talking to, right? Because you're like, if you think about like the room situation, you have like, you can tell these two people are talking. And so how long they're talking, so if you think about like the website and like say that the thing's encrypted, you still can get information about like, well, who usually goes to these sorts of websites. So like if we're talking about I don't know, if somebody's spending a lot of time on Etsy, they could be building stuff, they could be buying stuff, like they could be really into buying crafts, or they could be selling crafts online. So they might, like, either way they know that you're super into crafts, right? Because somebody can see that you're really into Etsy, and so then depending upon who's looking, maybe they can give you ads to help benefit off of knowing your love of crafts. But anyways, one of the things is like, I've talked about this before I think I've talked about this before, but anyways, with the VPNs, one of the reasons why people might use these is to protect themselves from their ISPs. Like they think that their internet service providers are watching them, and they are. I mean, it's like they could be selling your data, but it's it's not completely malicious. Like, they kind of do need to do that for their job, so they can kind of help predict traffic patterns and that sort of thing to give people a a solid internet experience, if you will. So there's lots of reasons why your data could be watched and that sort of thing. But the thing also to keep in mind from the last slide with incognito mode is that this transferring of packets doesn't apply. The incognito mode just applies to the computer that it's on. And then here's data flying around. Neat, huh? All right, so anyways, another people that could be watching you is the websites that you're on. So let's say you are looking at your Facebook or your Insta, Snapchat. Aside from the things that you upload, it's collecting a lot more data from you. So it can look at what you're looking at. So when you're scrolling, it knows what you're seeing, and it has an idea of how long you're looking at that information. So like going back to the crafts, is that if it notices that you're looking at a bunch of things that have yarn and colors and things like that, it might think that you're really into knitting or things that are knit. And it's able to predict maybe what you might also be into and like making these different connections with things. It also could help predict relationships with other people. So if you generally like this thing from this one person and you're into knitting, then maybe you know this other person too that also knows this person is into knitting. So they're able to start making those connections. And another thing is like some apps have access to your browsing habits, regardless if you go to that site on your browser. A lot of times you have apps like on your phone that get information from other apps. It shares and takes information to kind of help make some of those processes seamless. But there also could be using that information to get information about you. So, yeah. That kind of leads us into another thing about data mining. So data mining is about finding patterns, not necessarily about explaining them, right? So the idea with companies using it is to sell more stuff, right? Whether it's sell better ads to people or it's to help them find products that they might like that much better. So like Amazon might make it, might use data mining techniques to so that when somebody does a search, they are more likely to find things that they're looking for, sort of thing. So, but anyways, here's some like common things that data mining could help. Classification, knowing of if something is generally like this or it's like this. So like, for instance, determining, is this person pregnant or are they not pregnant? Like being able to make those sort of associations. And that's powerful stuff. As well as prediction as to when something might happen. When somebody, if they're pregnant, when they would have their baby, sort of thing. That sort of information could be powerful so that a store can collect it and figure out, all right, this person is pregnant. We want to make sure that we have them as a customer for when they have the baby, so that when it's when they just need to do a diaper run, they can go to our stores and buy a bunch of other stuff too. Okay. And so, I mean, the thing is like these stores are in the business of making money. And so if they could get that business from those people, then they have a nice steady source of revenue. And then even when that kid's out of diapers, those people will continue to shop there because they've been shopping there for so many years, right? So that's helpful stuff. Another thing that data mining can help do is clustering and association. So finding things that people generally look for together. So like, let's say that like often like an easy thing is like thinking about stores, so like Target or grocery stores, and thinking about what would make sense as to grouping things together, right? So maybe putting bananas in the cereal sections because people like to put bananas in their cereal. Lots of different reasons. And it could be like it seems to be kind of like maybe an obvious one. I've seen it in the grocery store and it's probably had a person do it, but maybe those less obvious ones a machine was able to kind of pick. Maybe a little bit more, seeming more subtle, like putting sweets near something, or I don't know. But the idea is it's like those groupings of that people don't normally think about. The machine learning can kind of help with that, the data mining. And then anomaly detection, this is something that's kind of traditionally used with credit cards systems and stuff like that, so that people know, or the card services can determine which purchases are made by an individual and which are potentially fraudulent. And so that's different things. So the idea is like with data mining, it's not just like maliciously trying to take advantage of people, though maybe sometimes it is. But the idea is that sometimes it's to the like companies use it for their to help encourage information. And it's not, like I said, it's not always like trying to get a customer for life. Maybe it's to get a customer to come back a couple more times. Like not as ambitious. Like sometimes the goals aren't as super ambitious. Sometimes it's just to help encourage that little bump in sales. Okay. But anyways, another thing that's kind of interesting that I think people kind of miss is the people that are involved in the data mining process. And the thing is like we talk about like machines making these calculations, and they are, but the thing is like along the whole way, there is people involved in getting the information and making sure that it's legitimate. That's where the validity of data is. It's making sure that the data is something that they can trust. Like for instance, if it's surveys that people are filling out and you know that people, like you heard a bunch of people like as they're filling out saying, oh, I'm going to put this thing in here because I think this is ridiculous, to just purposely throw things off because it's funny, then you probably don't want to use that data. So thinking about like what is good data is something that is something that's important for the process. So thinking about the information that goes in, or that's being referenced. Another thing that people could be involved in the process is the training, right? So if you think about like the training that if you're trying to encourage people to, well, in a lot of machine learning, not a lot of machine learning requires learning. That's what it is, right? And so that learning, that training happens, like for instance, if we're doing picture recognition. So like when you're trying to teach a program to recognize a face, you give them a bunch of pictures of faces and not faces and saying, this is a face, this is not a face, this is a face, this is not a face, this is a face, this is a face, not a face, not a face, this is a face, right? So it has that idea. So it's like, all right, I think I get it. And then you give it more things to test it. And depending upon if it was right or wrong, you tell, okay, you were right about this one, you're wrong about this thing. And then based upon those errors, the machine will adjust its models so that next time it will hopefully be better. Okay, so it just keeps on adjusting, and it's through that training, it's learning. And so there could be people that are involved in that process as to like what pictures of faces do we want to use, or pictures of not faces do we want to use, sort of thing. Maybe the thing is, and something to think about is like with this learning process, there's a little bit of ethics that can be involved. And machines are not, I mean, inherently not, don't discriminate, but I mean, in a way they can learn to discriminate, potentially. And that could happen through the training process. And it's not something that I'm accusing people of training machines that they will do that. I'm saying when we have people training, then their own discernment, when they're training based upon their own discerning perspectives, then those perspectives can come through the machine. So there's things that can be taught. Like for instance, if Like, let's say with the pictures, we're saying, all right, since let's identify apples, right? So they pick only red apples. And so then when a green or a yellow apple comes through, maybe the machine thinks like they're not good apples because in the past they've been told that they're not ripe, and so they're not good apples to eat or something like that. So the idea is like there's a lot with the training. There's people involved, and we got to kind of with the increased use of data mining and machine learning, we need to think about the ethics and the process that goes into how we do this to get the result, right? Because it's not just as black and white with these sort of things. So it's just something that as a society we need to keep in mind as we grow and use this tool more often. Speaking of using this tool, another thing about the data mining process is how this information is used, right? So like whether it is used in providing to influence elections. Is this something that we want, or is this something that we don't? I'm not trying to say anything political. I'm just saying maybe this is a conversation that we should be having. So, and I'm really not trying to say something either way. I'm just trying to say that if we are, is this something that we as a society are okay with using to influence one way or another? Or is this, it's something that we're still working out as a society is what I'm trying to say. So anyways, that's kind of all I had about with data for this lecture. But the other thing that I want to kind of talk about is to remind you about things that are due. So we have midterm evaluation for the teaching team that are due for Friday at 9 a.m. And then there's also these assignments which are due for class on Monday. The tiny project slides, which I went over on the last presentation. And then there's also the group project. You have 2 documents that are due before class. So if you've not worked on those, make sure you get on that and you talk to your group. Otherwise, you might end up with a 0. Anyway, I think that's good for today. I'll see you all next Monday. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please press the like button. It lets me know I'm doing something right. If you have any questions about any of the content, please send an email through Canvas to both me and the rest of the teaching team, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Do not send it through normal email. You will not get as fast response. If you have any suggestions for how I can make these videos better, please leave in the comments below. Don't forget to roundhouse kick the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified for when I post the next video. Anyway, I think that's good for now, and I will see you all next class.